It's the morning of May 3rd, 2018. The sun is just beginning to rise over Lekki, Lagos, one of Nigeria's most prestigious neighborhoods, Diamond Estate, Sangotedo, the kind of place where lawyers live, where doctors park their cars, where success is measured in square footage and school fees paid in British pounds. But inside one of those houses that morning, something unspeakable had happened. A neighbor heard nothing. A friend got a WhatsApp message in the middle of the night that simply said, "I have done something terrible." By the time police arrived, a man was dead. A woman was barely alive, and the scene they walked into was so horrifying that even hardened detectives struggled to process what they were seeing. This is the true story of Udeme Otike Odibi, a British Nigerian lawyer, a wife, and a woman who, on that morning, crossed the line that no one could ever take back. What's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, welcome. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we cover some of the most chilling, most thought-provoking true crime stories coming out of Africa. And today's story is one I have been getting requests for a very long time. Today we are talking about Udeme Otike Odibi, the Lagos lawyer whose name became permanently etched into Nigerian criminal history. A story of marriage, betrayal, rage, and a crime so brutal it made international headlines. Grab something to drink, settle in, because this is going to be a deep one. Let's start from the very beginning. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand who Udeme and Simforosa Otike Odibi were. Because this was not a story of two random strangers. This was a story of two educated, accomplished, professional people who, on paper, had everything going for them. Udem was 47 years old at the time of the incident. She held dual citizenship, both Nigerian and British. She was a qualified lawyer, sharp-minded, well-spoken. Friends who knew her described her as a peaceful person, someone they had never seen lose her temper in over 2 decades of friendship. One of her closest friends, Maureen Offor, would later tell a court that she had known Udeme since 1992. That's over 26 years. And in all that time, she had never witnessed Udeme act violently or aggressively toward anyone. Think about that. 26 years, and not once. Her husband, Simforosa Otike Odibi, was 50 years old, also a lawyer, also accomplished. He was from Delta State and by all accounts was a man who moved in high circles. But Simforosa had a past. Before Udeme, he had been married before. That first marriage produced a daughter who was, at the time of his death, studying in the United Kingdom. Udeme and Simforosa had gotten married in October 2014, a ceremony their close friends attended, full of joy and celebration. Maureen, Udeme's best friend, was present at that wedding. She watched them exchange vows. She believed in that union. But marriages are complicated things, and not everything that begins beautifully ends that way. From the outside, Udeme and Simforosa looked like a power couple. Two lawyers, a nice home in Diamond Estate, Sangotedo, Lekki, the kind of address that means something in Lagos. But behind those walls, things were deteriorating. Udeme had confided in her close friend Maureen that the marriage was in trouble. She wasn't happy. There were problems she carried quietly, the way many women in that situation do, not making noise publicly, not putting things on social media, but slowly, quietly breaking inside. The core issue, according to everything that later emerged in court, was infidelity. Udeme believed, and apparently had evidence, that Simforosa was having extramarital affairs, and every time she confronted him about it, his responses were not satisfactory. He was described in court testimony as appearing nonchalant, unbothered, dismissive, as if her pain didn't register. Now, I want to pause here for a second and say something important, because I know someone in the comments is already forming an opinion. Infidelity, as painful as it is, as soul-destroying as it can feel, is never ever a justification for violence. We are going to talk about what happened, and we are going to try to understand the human psychology behind it, but we will not excuse it. Are we clear? Good. Let's continue. The couple's issues had become known to people around them. Sinforosa's own family was aware. His mother knew, his siblings knew, Udeme's family in Calabar knew, friends on both sides knew. But nobody intervened in a meaningful way. That detail matters, and we'll come back to it. By early 2018, Udeme had taken a trip to the United Kingdom. According to our friend Maureen, the purpose of that trip was essentially to get some distance, to breathe, to step away from the tension at home and clear her head. She came back before Easter 2018. When she returned, things had not improved. Udeme told Maureen that Sinforosa was no longer eating at home. He wasn't showing up. He wasn't engaging. He was present physically in that house, but emotionally, he was somewhere else entirely. Maureen, like a good friend, tried to offer practical advice. She told Udeme to keep cooking for him, even small portions, as a way of keeping the peace. Small gestures, olive branches. But the olive branches were running out. Now we arrive at May 2nd, 2018, the day before everything exploded. Udeme was preparing to travel back to the United Kingdom. She had packed her bags. She had plans. Her best friend Maureen had come over to the house at Diamond Estate to help her pack for the trip. They spent time together, and then, this is the detail I find quietly significant, the two of them went to a cinema together. They watched a movie, just two old friends sharing a normal evening. Nobody who saw Udeme that day would have predicted what was about to happen. After the cinema, Udeme returned home. And that night, something changed. At some point, as she was getting her things in order before her morning flight, Udeme opened the bedside locker. She was looking for her marriage certificate, a document she needed for her UK trip. What she found instead, or what she found alongside it, triggered everything that came after. The exact details of what she discovered were revealed during testimony in court, and it pointed to further evidence of her husband's infidelity, something concrete, something she could not explain away or rationalize. She confronted Sinforosa. The argument that followed was explosive. Now here is something that is absolutely chilling in hindsight. Sinforosa actually called people that night. He called his neighbor, he called his mother, he called his younger sister. In those calls, he told them that Udeme was threatening to kill him with a knife. He was scared. He was asking for help. The neighbor he called warned him to be careful. His mother heard his words. His sister heard his words. But no one came. No one got in their car. No one called the police. No one knocked on that door. And by the time the sun rose over Lekki on May 3rd, 2018, Sinforosa Otike was gone. At approximately 7:30 in the morning on Thursday, May 3rd, 2018, the divisional police officer of Ogombo, Aja, received a distress call. He mobilized a team of detectives and drove to Diamond Estate, Sangotedo. What they found inside that home is difficult to describe. I am going to describe it because this is a true crime channel and the facts matter. But I want you to understand that what I'm about to say is deeply disturbing. Sinforosa Otike was found lying on the bed. He had been attacked with a frying pan, struck on the head. He had been stabbed multiple times with a kitchen knife. His stomach had been ripped open, exposing his intestines, and his genitals had been severed and placed in his right hand. He was dead. Udeme was found in the house as well. She had attempted to take her own life after the act, but the attempt was superficial. Neighbors rushed her to the hospital. She survived. The evidence left at the scene told the story. A large frying pan, big, shiny, now covered in blood. A kitchen knife. Multiple phones, some blood-stained. A blood-stained pen. And 2 passports. One Nigerian, one British, belonging to Udeme. The commissioner of police at the time, CP Edgar Imohimi, was briefed. He directed crime scene detectives from the homicide section to begin their investigation immediately. Nigeria woke up that morning to a story it would not forget. After being treated for her self-inflicted wounds at Safeway Hospital in Lekki, Udeme was moved to a police hospital in Ikeja, but she was placed in protective custody. It was here, while still recovering, that she gave her statement to investigators. The lead investigator was Assistant Superintendent of Police Olusegun Bamidele, head of the Homicide Section of the State Criminal Investigation Department in Panti, Yaba, Lagos. Bamidele later testified in court about what happened during that interview. He said it was an interactive session. He would ask questions and Udeme would explain and write her answers down herself. She identified herself as a lawyer. She spoke freely. In that statement, Udeme laid out the sequence of events, the marital issues, the infidelity, the confrontation on the night of May 2nd. She described the argument escalating. She described hitting him with the frying pan. She described stabbing him. And then, this is the part that stopped Nigeria cold. She described what happened while he was still alive, lying on the floor, his body failing. He said, according to the testimony given to the court by ASP Bamidele, Udeme sat beside her dying husband and looked at him. And she spoke. She said, I am paraphrasing what was read in court, that if his body was what was giving him the freedom to disregard her feelings, then it was better that part of him be removed. And she used the same knife to do exactly that. Then she placed a piece of it in his right hand. After that, she sent 3 messages. To her best friend Maureen at 12:04 a.m., I have done something terrible. To her brother-in-law Charles Akpoguma, just pray for us, may God forgive. To her mother in Calabar, sorry mom, we engaged in a fight. 3 messages, 3 different levels of what she was willing to say. To her best friend, almost a confession. To her in-law, a prayer request. To her mother, a euphemism so large it could swallow a building. When this story broke, Nigeria could not stop talking about it. And I mean that literally. Social media went into overdrive. Twitter, or whatever we're calling it now, was flooded. WhatsApp groups in every household were buzzing. Office conversations, market conversations, church conversations. Everybody had something to say, and the reactions split along very predictable lines. Some people condemned Udeme completely, without hesitation, without nuance. A woman had killed her husband. A man was dead. Nothing else mattered. That's murder. Full stop. Others went the opposite direction, pointing to infidelity, to the years of emotional pain, to the dismissiveness Simforosa allegedly showed every time Udeme raised her concerns. They argued that women are driven to breaking points, that society doesn't take the emotional abuse of marriage seriously enough, that Udeme must have been suffering in ways nobody around her fully understood. And then there was a third group, quieter, more uncomfortable to sit with, who pointed out something that the initial coverage mostly skipped over. Simforosa had called people that night. He had told his neighbor, his mother, his sister, that he was afraid. He had named the threat, and nobody had come. What does it say about how we respond, or don't respond, when someone tells us they're afraid in their own home? These are difficult questions. There are no clean answers, but they are worth asking. Udeme Otike Odibi was formally arrested and charged by the Lagos state government. On June 13, 2018, about 6 weeks after the incident, she was arraigned before an Igbosere High Court in Lagos. The charges brought against her by the Lagos State Director of Public Prosecutions, Titilayo Shitabe, were 2 in number. Count 1, murder, for the stabbing and killing of her husband, Simforosa Otike Odibi, on May 3, 2018, at their Diamond Estate home in Sangotedo, Lekki, Lagos. Count 2, misconduct with regard to a corpse for the mutilation of his body after his death. Both offenses were brought under the Criminal Law of Lagos State, 2015, specifically sections 223 and 165b. Udeme stood before the court and entered her plea, not guilty. She was subsequently remanded at Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison to await trial. For many Nigerians, the not guilty plea added another layer of shock to an already shocking story. But from a legal standpoint, it was entirely within her rights. The legal process was just beginning. The trial of Udeme Otike Odibi before Justice Adedayo Akintoye of the Lagos State High Court became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in recent Nigerian legal history, and not just because of how gruesome the underlying facts were, but because both the accused and the deceased were lawyers. The courtroom was, in a very strange way, a professional environment for the woman in the dock. She understood procedure, she understood evidence, she understood exactly what was being built against her. The prosecution called 9 witnesses over the course of the proceedings. These included police investigators, forensic personnel, neighbors, and close friends. Among the most significant was Maureen Offor, Udemi's best friend of over 26 years. Maureen took the stand and recounted the events of May 2nd, 2018. She described how she had come to help Udemi pack, how they went to the cinema together, how normal Udemi seemed that evening. She also described receiving that midnight WhatsApp message, "I have done something terrible," and her reaction of shock and confusion because Udemi was supposed to be on a plane to the UK that very morning. Maureen also described the calls that followed. Udemi's mother calling at around 4 a.m. saying the couple had been fighting. Maureen calling Simforosa's brother Andrew, who already knew something was wrong because his own mother had called him the night before. And then, finally, Udemi's mother calling back to say that Simforosa was dead. Maureen said she started screaming. Her husband had to take the phone from her. That detail, a friend screaming and having to be held, tells you something about the human cost of this story beyond the courtroom. The central battle in this trial was over Udemi's confessional statement. Remember, ASP Bamidele had testified that Udemi wrote out a detailed confession during their interactive session at the police hospital, a statement in which she described, in her own words and her own handwriting, exactly what she had done and why. If that confession was admitted as evidence, the prosecution's case became significantly stronger. Udemi's legal team, led by her counsel Oluse Ebanjoko, fought hard to have that statement thrown out. The argument? That the statement was obtained without a lawyer present and without being video recorded, both of which, her defense argued, were required under Nigerian constitutional law, specifically Section 35(2) of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and Section 93 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Law of Lagos State 2015. This triggered what is known in Nigerian legal procedure as a trial within a trial, a mini hearing conducted specifically to determine whether that confession was legally obtained and therefore admissible in the main trial. Udemi's defense made an application to stop even that process. The court rejected the application. Then, after the trial within trial was conducted, Justice Akintoye delivered her ruling. She found that the confessional statement did not contravene either the constitutional provision or the Lagos State criminal justice law. The application to reject it was dismissed. The statement was admitted. Udemi's legal team had tried every procedural avenue available to them. The confession was staying in. Throughout the trial, the prosecution tendered a range of physical exhibits that painted a clear picture of what had occurred inside that house. The frying pan, large, shiny, and by the time police collected it, covered in blood. This was the first weapon used, the instrument of the initial attack on Simforosa's head. The kitchen knife, blood covered. This was the weapon used in the stabbing. Multiple wounds to the stomach area, severe enough to expose internal organs. Phones, 4 in total, 2 of them blood-stained. These were significant because they contained the WhatsApp messages that Udemi sent after the attack. Digital evidence that placed her at the scene at a specific time and showed her state of mind, or at least her awareness, of what she had done. The blood-stained pen, the pen Udemi used to write her confessional statement. And finally, the 2 passports, Nigerian and British, both belonging to Udem, found at the scene when police conducted their search of the property. Each exhibit told a piece of the story. Together, they formed a prosecutorial picture that was hard to look away from. The prosecution also, at one point during proceedings, showed photographs, images of Udemi on a hospital bed after the incident, and images of Simforosa at the scene. The courtroom was not the same after those photographs were shown. Some things once seen cannot be unseen. I want to take a moment here to do something that I think true crime coverage sometimes fails to do properly. Let's talk about Simforosa, not as a symbol, not as a cautionary tale about infidelity, not as a plot device in a story about his wife's rage, but as a person. Simforosa Otike Odibi was 50 years old. He was a lawyer. He had a daughter from his first marriage who was studying in the United Kingdom. He had a family, a mother who loved him, a younger sister who was waiting for his call. He had colleagues, friends, a life. On the night he died, he was scared. He called people to tell them so. He reached out to his neighbor, to his mother, to his sisters, and said, "I am afraid. This woman is threatening me." That act of reaching out in those final hours is humanizing in a way that is almost unbearable. He knew something was wrong. He tried to get help. He did everything someone in danger is supposed to do. Tell people, warn people, ask for help. And it wasn't enough. Whatever the state of his marriage, whatever he may or may not have done within it, he did not deserve to die the way he died. He did not deserve to have his life end in a pool of his own blood, in his own home on an ordinary Thursday morning in Lagos. Let's not forget that. This case opened up conversations in Nigeria, and honestly, beyond Nigeria, that were long overdue. The first conversation: domestic violence in marriages where both partners are highly educated. There is a persistent myth that domestic violence, in all its forms, emotional, psychological, and physical, only happens in households with low education or low income. This case blew that myth apart in real time. Both Udeme and Simforosa were lawyers. Both were educated far beyond average. And yet something deeply dysfunctional was happening behind that door in Diamond Estate. Education does not automatically produce emotional intelligence. Degrees do not automatically produce conflict resolution skills. Success on paper does not guarantee health in private. The second conversation: what happens when people are told about danger and do nothing? Simforosa told multiple people he was afraid. His calls were received, his words were heard, and still nobody mobilized, nobody came, nobody called the police. The instinct was to say, they're adults, they'll sort it out. That instinct, however understandable, contributed to a man losing his life. If someone tells you they are afraid in their home, take it seriously. Make the call, drive to the house, do something. Because sometimes sorting it out themselves is not what happens. The third conversation: the justice system and what accountability looks like. Udeme pleaded not guilty. She fought the admissibility of her own confession. The trial went on for months. And across Nigeria, people asked, what does justice look like here? What does it mean to be held accountable? These are not questions with easy answers, but they matter. As of the last public reporting on this case, Udeme Otike Odibi remained in custody at Kirikiri prison, awaiting the conclusion of her trial before Justice Akintoye at the Lagos State High Court in Igbosere. The confession had been admitted. The prosecution had closed its case with 9 witnesses. The defense was mounting its response. The case drew attention not just because of its brutality, but because of what it represented. 2 members of the Nigerian legal profession married to each other, destroyed by what happened between them. The Bar Association watched. The legal community watched. Nigeria watched. The final verdict in this case, whatever it turned out to be, was always going to carry weight far beyond the individuals involved. If you have followed updates on this case more recently than my research covers, drop it in the comments below. I want to know, and I know the community does too. Before I close out, I want to say something personal. Stories like this one stay with you. They sit in the back of your mind because they force you to ask uncomfortable questions, not about the people involved, but about ourselves, about our communities, about the systems we have built and the ones we have failed to build. What support systems do we have for couples in crisis? Not just couples in poor communities, all couples. Because clearly, having money and degrees is not a shield. What do we teach people, men and women, about how to process pain, jealousy, rage, betrayal? because the absence of that education has consequences, real, bloody, irreversible consequences. What do we do when someone we love tells us they are afraid? Do we say they'll be fine, or do we act? And finally, for anyone watching this right now who is in a relationship where things are bad, where anger is building, where you feel like you're reaching a breaking point, please, before you do something that cannot be undone, leave. Call someone, walk out the door, go anywhere. No relationship, no betrayal, no amount of pain is worth what happened in that house in Sangotedo. And for anyone who has a friend or family member in that situation, don't wait for them to call you twice. Pick up the first time. Show up. That is the story of Udeme Otike Odibi, a case that shook Lagos, shocked Nigeria, and made headlines around the world. A story about two lawyers, one marriage, years of unaddressed pain, and a single night that ended a life and destroyed another. If this video gave you something to think about, please hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel reach more people. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you haven't already, because we go deep on stories like this every week. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely read them. What stood out to you? What questions do you have? What conversations do you think we need to have in our communities because of cases like this?